Great. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Christy Del Coro, and I'm here with my colleague Jackie Topo, who will be speaking momentarily to introduce Leslie. For those of you who don't know us, we're both registered dietitians and culinary nutritionists, and we're the co-founders of the Culinary Nutrition Collaborative. I'm sure you know about a little bit about us. That's how you registered for this event. But we offer culinary-focused continuing education that really translates nutrition science into the kitchen. So there's almost always a culinary component to our events, and we always try to weave in the science through our cooking and our recipes. We started with our first annual conference in 2017 and have now grown to offering primarily virtual events, but also some in person year-round to thousands of dietitians nationwide. And sometimes we get some join us internationally as well, which is fun. We're thrilled to be joined today by our colleague, Leslie Bonci, who we will introduce in a moment. And we're grateful to California Prunes for their support of today's webinar. Our mission is for dietitians to gain more confidence in the kitchen, while also sharing evidence-based information with your respective audiences, whether that's through a cooking demo, recipes, blog post, social media, speaking engagement, or in your counseling, even in private practice or in a clinical setting. Now, just to go over some housekeeping before we get started, please keep yourself muted. There are a lot of us on the call today. We have over 500 live now with many more trickling in. And as Jackie mentioned, we really do try to keep this as a meeting format to really foster a sense of community so everyone can interact with each other. But in order to do that, we just need your cooperation to keep yourself muted and be sure not to share your screen accidentally, since we need this feature for our presenters. We will definitely take questions and comments in the chat box. We like to have an active chat box. So if you have any questions, pop them in the chat box and then we will get to them. If it's time sensitive, we'll answer it right away. If not, we'll get to it at the end and we'll come back to it. You're welcome to keep your video on, and if you're cooking along, we'd love to see what you're making, and maybe we'll have time at the end to share if you'd like to share what you've made, but definitely keep your video on if you want, but you don't have to. And for the best viewing experience, please set your Zoom to speaker view instead of gallery view. Otherwise, we will all remain very small on your computer screen and it will be hard for you to see. So just set that to speaker view. If you're unsure of how to do that, just ask us in the chat box. We will be recording this webinar and sending it to all registrants within 1 week. We'll also be sharing a link to a short survey, and when you complete this, you'll be able to download the CEU certificate. So it's always a question we get, how do you get the CEU certificate? That will come when you fill out the survey. There will be a link and we'll explain all of that in an email. If you have any questions about this, feel free to message us or email us at info@culinarynutritioncollaborative.com. Now I'm going to turn it over to Jackie, who will introduce Leslie.
Well, before I introduce Leslie, we just want to let you know that we're going to be running a contest during this webinar. So any post in an Instagram story, post, or reel of one of the recipes from today gives you an opportunity to win a beautiful cutting board and a collection of goodies from California Prunes. You have until Wednesday, March 6th to enter, and be sure to tag us at Culinary Nutrition Collab and CA Prunes. That's the California Prunes Instagram account. And we'll include these details in the chat box so you can reference them. And now, without further ado, we're going to begin the educational portion of our webinar and introduce our special guest, Leslie Bonci. Leslie J. Bonci, MPHRD, CSSD, LDN, FAND, is a registered dietitian, board certified specialist in sports dietetics, and is the owner of Active Eating Advice, Be Fit, Fed, Fearless, a nutrition consulting company, and co-founder of Performance 365, a sports nutrition consulting company. She was the sports nutrition consultant for the 2020, 2023, and 2024 Super Bowl champions, Kansas City Chiefs. Her company, Performance 365, provides sports nutrition services for universities, industry, and professional sports teams. She also runs a private nutrition counseling practice, specializing in performance nutrition, weight management, and body composition optimization, disordered eating, and digestive disorders. Furthermore, Leslie is an adjunct instructor in the School of Dental Medicine at the University of Pittsburgh and teaches in the Doctor of Physical Therapy program at Pitt and the Athletic Training program at Duquesne University. Given her extensive experience and expertise, it's no surprise that Leslie is frequently quoted in media and is a nationally and internationally recognized speaker, and is a 2021 recipient of the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics Medallion Award. We're so happy to have you here, and please take it away, Leslie.
All right, thank you so much. And hi, everybody. I am absolutely thrilled to sing the prune tune with you today and hopefully give you some knowledge, some things about prunes that you didn't know before. So next slide, please. And just disclosures from all three of us. This presentation is being funded by the California Prune Board. I am a paid consultant for the California Prune Board. I've been compensated for this presentation. No other relevant disclosures from the Culinary Nutrition Collab or from myself. Next slide, please. And just briefly, the learning objective, we are going to evaluate what lifestyle factors are involved that influence bone health. Also, to examine and interpret the scientific research, which I think you'll find fascinating, on how prune consumption affects bone health, and talk a little bit about some of the factors that influence consumers' food choices related to bone health. And for all of you, I think the most exciting part is demonstrating the taste and versatility of California prune through these wonderful recipe demos. So let's get into it. Next slide, please. So showing you this word cloud about healthy bones, and you know, I meet with patients all of the time, you know, some surreal and some real people, and you know, we think about what are healthy bones or what comprises healthy bone. You know, the goal here is to be hale, not frail. And interestingly, this is not just an issue for women, it is an issue for men as well. So how is it that we do that? And also, you know, how do we support our supporting structures? What we know, what do we say, and what should we emphasize more? Next slide, please. And so that being said, when we talk about bone health and we talk to our patients, the consumers, whatever, is what kinds of things do we say? Well, what are the most common things nutritionally that we might advise? Having enough protein, sure, that is critically important for bone health and actually probably a little bit more important than calcium. If people take calcium supplementation and they don't consume adequate protein, they don't necessarily help their bone health. So, you know, thinking about optimal protein, dairy foods have been associated with bone health, calcium and vitamin D. But what might not be as familiar? The role of vitamin K, and we'll talk about that in a moment. The role of fat in supporting healthy bones. The role of potassium and boron. Well, what about from a lifestyle perspective? Yes, weight-bearing exercise. A lot of people have heard that. So you walk, you run, you do elliptical exercise. That doesn't mean you shouldn't swim or row. Those are critically important too, or even cycling. Strength training is critically important. But in addition to that, it is also essential that somebody maintains flexibility and they work on balance, because all of those things together really help to support healthy bones. Next slide, please. So conversely, when we think about some of the risk factors, and we're going to talk about women for a moment and osteoporosis in women, what are the variables that we cannot control? We can't control the age that we are. We can lie about it, but we can't control it. We can't control our size, and I'm talking frame size here. If somebody has a small frame, they are at increased risk for osteoporosis. Family history, we can't choose those genes. People who need to be on certain medications that might have bone weakening effect. If you need to be on the meds, that's something that is a given. And if somebody has early menopause, something not in control. On the other hand, what can we control? Well, smoking. We can choose not to smoke, and that decreases the risk. We can choose to be prudent with our alcohol intake, which might also decrease the risk of osteoporosis. We can do better with our calcium intake and with our vitamin D intake, and we can move. And all of those things, it doesn't mean we won't develop osteoporosis, but we might delay the development of by making sure that we're doing all the things we can to support healthy bones. Next slide, please. So when we think about bones and realizing we're talking here about prunes today, prune is a food. It's a very easy food for people to consume, and it is a fruit. So, those are all very, very positive things. I'm sure that you all know this, but thinking about the fact that bone development peaks around the age of 30 is that if we haven't done things up to that point, then we're starting that downward trajectory, which is really what we want to prevent. But what is it about prunes that might confer the benefit? Well, first of all, they are a significant source of micronutrients. And which ones? Boron, potassium, copper, vitamin B6, all of those have a role to play in helping to support healthy bones. We know that prunes, and eating them every day, it's simple, right? There's no effort involved in doing that. There's no preparation that's required in eating them. And indeed, they may be preventative, they may be protective, and it might be a proactive behavior when we're looking at things that help to optimize bone health. In addition, prunes are an excellent source of vitamin K, and there aren't a lot of foods that are. Prunes provide manganese, and that helps to contribute to the maintenance of normal bone. In the studies that have been done to date, many of them are suggesting 50 grams, or roughly we're talking 5 to 7 prunes a day that may help to prevent bone loss in postmenopausal women. So very, very exciting. So next slide, and let's take a deeper dive into this. So when we think about the role that prunes play from the standpoint of prunes and bone health, what are we talking about? Well, most of the research at this point has shown that prunes may have a role to play in terms of slowing that catabolic or breakdown impact on bone health. The exact mechanism and the components of this have not yet been confirmed, but more research is indicating the benefit that prunes provide. So how does this work? Well, first of all, it is the vitamin K in prunes that may improve the absorption of calcium, right? So calcium doesn't just exist by itself. There are other things that help the process. Vitamin D has a role to play as well. In addition to that, we know that the antioxidants that are present in the prunes, and that is primarily due to the polyphenols that are in them, may help to mitigate the negative effects of reactive oxygen species and oxidative stress on the bone. So another positive benefit. Third is that we think about the macronutrient and primarily the fiber, the carbohydrate that is in prune, but the micronutrients as well also have a role to play in terms of supporting bone health. The potassium, boron, magnesium, manganese, copper, vitamin K. And then the phytonutrients, or those polyphenols, including in prunes, chlorogenic and neochlorogenic acid, caffeic acid, and rutin. And interestingly, the sorbitol that is present naturally in prunes that actually has a laxation effect, which is why they can be beneficial for your bowel health, but also may have a positive, favorable effect on the gut microbiota. Next slide, please. So I'm going to talk about this study, and this study just came out very, very recently, the Prune study. And the Prune study was a 12-month study, 300 women postmenopausal between the ages of 55 to 75, all who had low bone density, and they were randomized to one group that not consuming prunes, but got 1,200 milligrams of calcium, 800 IUs of vitamin D, one group who got 50 grams, so about 5 to 7 prunes with the calcium and vitamin D, and one group that consumed 100 grams of prunes, or basically 10 to 12 prunes a day with the calcium and vitamin D. And the primary outcomes of this, we're looking at bone density, assessed through DEXA, looking at bone geometry done with PQCT, looking at bone strength as well, also assessed that way. And then the bone markers. So one of them being CTX, which is serum C-terminal telepeptide, and the other P1NP, serum procollagen type 1 N-terminal propeptide. I'm not repeating that again. And then the secondary outcome, we're looking at inflammatory markers. So the inflammatory cytokines as well as C-reactive protein. And also what was assessed in this, a fecal assessment to look at changes in the microbiome. And the women in this trial kept a diet exercise log 7 days, and that was done every 3 months. So basically 4 times over the course of this study. Next slide, please. Okay, and so if we look at the bottom here, so there were a couple of arms of this study, but what was one of the things that was found is that in postmenopausal women who had low bone density, or the women in this study, is 5 to 7 prunes a day actually prevented bone loss and mitigated fracture risk at the hip. And that is really exciting because we know that hip fractures, if a woman has to be hospitalized as a result of that, an increased risk of pneumonia and increased morbidity, mortality as a result. And so looking at preventing that loss of total hip bone mineral density after 6 months, that was when this was found, and that benefit persisted for 12 months. So very, very positive, and this was the change that people made. Didn't make changes other than this. Well, there were some earlier studies that also started to get at this too. The first one, which was done by Drs. Hushmand and Dr. Arjmandi in 2011, found that prunes compared to dried apples actually had a benefit of increasing ulna and spine bone mineral density and decreasing those markers of bone turnover. And that's what we don't want. We don't want the resorption. We want to hold on to the bone. And then a study in 2016 that also looked at both a 5 to 7 gram consumption and a 10 to 12, 5 to 7 prune or 10 to 12 prune consumption a day had less total loss of body bone mineral density in postmenopausal women, and also lowered the biomarker of bone breakdown. So again, looking at some very, very positive benefits of something that is an add-in, and so often it's the takeaway, don't eat this, don't eat this. Here we're talking about what somebody can add in every day and the benefits that they might see. Next slide, please. And then, the other arm of the study, the prune study, was looking at the anti-inflammatory effect. And what the study showed is that those phenols that are present in the prunes may be what is responsible for that anti-inflammatory effect and the antioxidant activity, resulting in slowing the processes involved in bone loss, and at the same time, maybe even preventing or promoting bone formation. And one of the things that they talk about in this study is that as for women, as we age and we have estrogen deficiency, this is something called inflammaging. And so that happens with age. And the problem is that when we have less estrogen, we can have elevated inflammatory mediators and markers of oxidative stress. So anything that we can do to reverse that is positive from the standpoint of bone preservation. And basically, looking at how much is here, from 50 to 100 grams, or basically from 5 to 7 to 10 to 12 prunes a day over 12 months, reduce those pro-inflammatory cytokine secretion. And again, this is really positive and really exciting. The other study that's cited here, another very recent study out of San Diego State from Dr. Hushman and Dr. Kern, is looking at the effect on men. So again, this is not just limited to women, is that men who were consuming prunes actually had improved bone geometry, greater bone strength, and lower markers of bone breakdown. So this, again, is very, very positive, and you're going to hear about how we can incorporate these into our diet every day. Next slide, please. And then this other more recent study, this is from Dr. Arjmandi out of Florida State, and the study was done with 35 men ages 55 to 80, consuming either 5 to 7 or 10 to 12 prunes a day. And what they did is that they measured the bone turnover, and specifically what they measured was the the effect on, or the osteoprotegerone. So what we're looking at here is the osteoclast. Osteoclasts are the problem. That's the bone breakdown. The osteoclasts are the bone formation. And so what was found in this study is that those who consumed 10 to 12 prunes a day, they had a decrease in osteocalcin. What did that mean? Decreased bone turnover, a very, very positive thing. Interestingly, those who were consuming the smaller amount of prune had decreases in their serum osteoprotegerone, or basically OPG, but they had increased OPG RANKL, and it is that ratio that impacts the bone formation. So basically indicating that they had less bone resorption. So again, we don't always have to do the higher doses. Sometimes the lower doses can be very, very effective in producing a positive change. Next slide, please. And so some of the future studies that are being looked at, one is investigating the impact and effect of prunes on calcium absorption in the body. Exactly how does that work? A retention in the bone, and ultimately how that impacts bone formation. And then the other component of that is looking at the potential effect of prebiotics in prune and how that impacts gut inflammation and bone biomarkers, because all of this is very much intertwined. So more to come on that. Next slide, please. So when we think about what consumers want, and all of us are consumer facing each and every day, I talk to patients all the time. And when we talk to our patients about having to make changes to eating, you know, one of the things that people say all the time, and the Food Insight, IFIC, International Food Information Council surveys that are done every year indicate this as well. People want convenient. They don't want to have to spend a ton of time. We also want things that require minimal preparation. Plant-based is extremely popular and growing. And guess what? Prunes are a plant, so it fits right in that verbiage. But appropriate food portions are also important. And that isn't just a weight management issue. Sometimes it's just a comfort level. So I think it's really very exciting. The studies, one looked at 5 to 7 prunes a day, or 10 to 12, that it doesn't always have to be the larger amount of prunes to confer the benefit. We know that consumers want the idea of whole food. This is a fruit, it's a prune, it's a whole food. And the idea of food with added benefits. So above and beyond the macronutrient profile, what are the micronutrients? What are the phytonutrients that are there? And the versatility, which you'll see when you see the cooking demos. Next slide, please. So what else is it that consumers want? Availability. Well, this is the nice thing about a dried fruit. It's available all year long. It's not going to spoil. There is shelf stability with this product. Also, it's a way to help increase produce intake, right? We know that that continues to be a problem. People are not consuming enough fruit and vegetable each and every day. So this is a very, very easy thing to do. I do a lot of prune recipe development. I'm telling you, prune and Brussels sprout, fabulous. It's also the idea of add-ins versus the takeaways, or the idea of swap for. Instead of A, maybe we're choosing B instead. Yes, we still want indulgence, and that's not a bad word. That's a culinary word. That's an enjoyable word. I want to eat something that I enjoy, that tastes good to me. I like the mouthfeel. I like the flavors. I like all of it. And less guilt, because we know that that word still circulates out there, and we want people to get away from that. Why should we not enjoy the foods that we eat? That's ridiculous. And also the idea of less waste. Well, guess what? When you're using a dried fruit, there's nothing to throw away except the empty container when you've used them all. So that's another positive. Next slide, please. And then as registered dietitians, what do we want? We want our patients, our clients, the public to be satisfied. We want them to be thrilled with the recommendations that we're giving. We also want to recommend things that help somebody to have more motivation, and maybe the idea of adherence. I can do this because I enjoy it and it's easy and I can fit this into my lifestyle. To provide whole body value as well as benefits. To effect positive change without too much effort, because we know it's very difficult for people to do that. and to help our clients, our patients, and our audiences strive and thrive. And so at this point, what I would like to do is to turn it over to Jackie and Christy to enlighten us on how to bring the prune intuition into the kitchen.
Let me take myself off mute. There we go. Okay. So we are going to be talking all about how we can use prunes in recipes in really creative ways. So let's go to the next slide. So prunes have a really interesting flavor profile. They have a sweet and rich flavor with notes of plum and raisin and caramel. They're also soft and chewy and velvety, and they have a nice smooth texture as well. And when you cook them, they become juicy, or if you rehydrate them, they can really get nice and plump. And as far as a flavor profile goes, they add sweet notes, tangy and earthy flavors, which makes it really versatile for both sweet and savory dishes. Next slide. And we can use them in so many different ways and in so many different recipes, whether they're in whole form or they're diced or pureed. California prunes are really versatile as a staple ingredient for an everyday snack or a whole dish. You can pair them with proteins or with greens, which Christy is going to show you in her recipe. You can add them to salads or cereal, oatmeal, yogurt, or no bake energy bites, which I'm going to show you in the recipe I'm going to be creating. You can also use them in sauces to add a depth of flavor and natural sweetness, such as in a barbecue sauce. And it's also a great substitute in baking. You can substitute it for sugar, oil, or eggs. And it's also really great for baking because it adds a lot of moisture. And Christy, I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Jackie. So we just have a couple more slides and then we will get into our cooking. So just to go over a few specific suggestions of how to pair prunes when you're cooking. So when we think about, complementary ingredients, prunes, since they're a dried fruit, really pair well with bright, tangy fruits like your apples, pears, pomegranate seeds, and citrus, which I'll be featuring today in the farro salad. We're making a citrus vinaigrette. They also go with creamy fermented dairy products, really strong aged flavorful cheeses like your aged Gouda, Manchego, even like a Pecorino, blue cheese, of course. And also, as Leslie mentioned, something like Brussels sprouts, roasted vegetables like your broccoli, green beans, sauteed greens, but also some of those cruciferous ones. They also go well with your sweeter vegetables. So butternut squash is beautiful I'm going to talk about some substitutions for what I'm making today. You could add some butternut squash to this farro salad, caramelized onions, beets, sweet potatoes, and those warm spices, your cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom, and then toasted nuts. Today I'm using pistachios, but other nuts go well like pecans, walnuts, almonds, and pine nuts. So there's really a lot of versatility. They're not just a snacking food. So they're great for snacking, but we really want to highlight today how they can be used as an ingredient in your cooking. They also go really well as a counterbalance to spicy ingredients. So that sweet and spicy, sweet and sour, sweet and salty, that contrast in flavor works really well with prunes. So spicy ingredients like chilies and cayenne, hearty grains. So today I'm using farro, but I'm going to talk about some other grains like barley or some gluten-free grains that you could use in place of the farro. You can make savory oatmeal or sweet oatmeal with those warm spices, quinoa, brown rice, basmati rice, wild rice. You could use barley, as I said, something like sorghum even, the buckwheat growth. So there's really endless possibilities in terms of in the grain family, but something hearty that can stand up to it and won't, break down easily. Fresh herbaceous ingredients. So this dressing today I'm making has a lot of fresh herbs. I'm using mint and parsley today, but Something like ginger would also be really great as an aromatic and a complementary ingredient to the prunes. Now, umami is a word we hear a lot as another flavor, and another sense of taste that we have, that savory flavor. So umami is in things like soy sauce, roasted tomatoes, but also is listed here, craft beer, miso, and mushrooms. So I think miso, I've never actually done a recipe with prunes and miso, but I think that's such a wonderful idea. I'm going to try it. I think that would be really beautiful together. And then your salty ingredients like olives, capers, anchovies, that would, and again, similar to the cheeses, those aged cheeses, that brings that salty, sweet balance. And some of those aged cheeses also have that umami flavor to them. Can also incorporate meat and poultry, so we don't have to be entirely plant-based. When you said Brussels sprouts, I think about pancetta or bacon. It could be used as a flavor enhancer, so it doesn't have to be large quantities, but something like prunes, caramelized onions or roasted Brussels sprouts and a little bit of bacon could be really nice dish, or duck really goes well with those sweeter fruits. And then, of course, sweets. So we all know, chocolate and prunes, caramel, ice cream with like stewed prunes. That would be really delicious together too. And then lastly, some of your stronger bitter flavors like coffee, or if you wanted to soak them in a tea or some kind of liqueur like the brandy and cognac, that would be equally as delicious. So there's the endless possibilities here. These are just some ideas to get you excited and creative, get those creative juices flowing, and really think outside the box in terms of your recipe development and not just thinking of them as a snacking ingredient. So now these are our references which you'll have available which we can come back to, but you'll have available on the PDF of the slides that we'll send out to you. But I'm going to stop sharing. And just make sure that you, again, have your Zoom set to speaker view. I'm going to do that for myself now. And that you can see everything in terms of my demo here. So I should be large on your screen. So I'm going to start, I'm going to be going back and forth between talking to you where you'll see my face, and then I'll move the camera down so you can see close up on the cutting board. But today I'm going to be making a farro salad. For those of you who might not be well, let me know in the chat box if anyone is not familiar with farro. So let's get some engagement going. I like to know a little bit about whether you're a fan of farro or you've never used it before. Farro is one of my favorite grains. So farro is in the wheat family. This is the dried version. So it's not gluten-free, if anyone's wondering. It's an Italian, it's an ancient grain, and they use it a lot in Italian cooking. And it's a type of wheat. It's one of, the oldest forms of wheat. And you'll see it in supermarkets. Now it's more mainstream, but also, you might need to go to the bulk section of your health food store. They'll have it there, or it's easily found online. So it's great. It's not very starchy like it doesn't, the one I'm using today is a pearled grain. You'll see it cooked. This is what it looks like. So you cook it just like you would a rice or even a pasta. Like if there's extra liquid left over, you can just drain it out. It does get a little bit sticky. This was cooked yesterday, so it can clump together a little bit. There's a little bit of starchiness, but really it comes, the grains, are pretty individual, and it's very hardy, so it can stand up, to being made overnight. And sorry, I'm just hearing a little bit of background noise. I just want to make sure everyone's muted. Okay, there we go. So you can make this in advance. So I made a big batch yesterday, and then I put it in the refrigerator, and I'm letting, I brought it to room temperature today to make this salad. So it's really great for meal prep. You can make it in advance and then, eat it all week. So I'm going to, and the ratio, if you want to know, is you'll see different package directions, but sometimes they say 3 to 1, like 3 parts water, 1 part grain, like 1 cup of grain and 3 cups of water. But sometimes I get away with 2 to 1. So, you just have to use your own judgment. And if you have too much water, no big deal. You can just drain it out. It takes about 20 minutes to cook. So not very difficult at all. So today I'm going to start by just adding some ingredients to your farro salad, and then we'll make the vinaigrette. So I'm going to take some fennel. And this is, I'm going to show you how to cut this, and I have some cut. This is a fennel bulb. So I usually take the tops off. Sometimes they come with really long tops as well. And you can save the greens as a garnish, the tops as they're called fronds. You can save those. So then, and this has a beautiful anise flavor. So then I cut the end off, cut it in half. And then I'm only going to need a little bit for this recipe. So then I'm quartering that. And there's a little core in the middle. So I'm slicing that out. And then just going to cut slices here and then dice it. So this doesn't have to be, you know, too exact here. Just like that. So there I have my fennel. So I'm going to add that to the bowl, to the grain salad. So this is about a half a cup of diced fennel. And now I'm going to add some radicchio. Radicchio is also one of those kind of underutilized vegetables. So this is in the chicory family. It looks like a cabbage, but it's actually in the chicory family, along with endive and escarole. And it has a lot of anthocyanins in it from the purple. And it's very bitter, but in a good way, because that's a nice complement to the sweet prunes. Again, I quarter that, cut out the core, and then I'm just doing thin slices. And then I'm going to cut across again. And it kind of comes apart. I might go across again a few times so they're more bite size. And then I have about a half a cup of that too. So this was a larger one, so I might not add all of that, but this doesn't have to be very exact. You know, grain salads, you can really just use your eye. We always use recipes as a guide, but you don't have to be, you know, really measuring every single thing out with a grain salad. Okay, now I'm going to have my prunes. So these are, I have these whole pitted prunes here. This is about 12 prunes, and it's going to give me half a cup of diced prunes. So I like to dip my knife into some hot water before I slice them so that they come off more easily. But I'm adding those to my grain mixture here. And then I'm going to add some pistachios. So this is a quarter cup of dried pistachios. I mean, dry roasted, shelled pistachios. So this part, you could stop here, put this in the fridge, or even wait to add the nuts, and then dress it later. So you could leave it in this point, put it in the fridge in the morning, and then, you know, when you're ready to serve it, you add the dressing. So now we're going to make the dressing. So I already have here my fresh herbs. I have a quarter cup of chopped fresh parsley and 2 tablespoons of chopped fresh mint. I really like that combination. And I'm going to make a vinaigrette with some minced shallot. So this is a shallot. It's a little, some people say it's like a cross between onion and garlic, but it is in that family. Sometimes there's kind of 2 in 1 here. So you pull it apart. It has a nice sweetness to it, and it does still have that raw onion flavor. So I'm going to show you how to slice it. If it's a little bit too strong for you, I put in the recipe, you can soak it, you can rinse it with some water before you add it to the grain salad, but otherwise you can just add it raw. But if you want to add it to the vinaigrette and you want it a little bit more mellow, you can just rinse it first in a mesh strainer. I'll show you how to do that. So I just went a few times cutting like an onion, horizontal slices, and then across so that you get a nice small mince. And then if you want, you know, I have a little mesh strainer here. You just dunk it in some water. It just takes off some of that raw onion flavor. I mean, depends really just personal taste. And then just drain that. But like I said, you don't have to do that step. So then I have my shallot here, the parsley. And then we're just gonna add some orange juice because that orange juice goes so beautifully with it. So I have a 1/4 cup of freshly squeezed orange juice and a teaspoon of honey. It's just a little bit, but it's just enough to add a little bit of sweetness to that dressing. Then I have a tablespoon of white wine vinegar. You can also use, like I wanted to use a white balsamic, but I didn't want to have too much of a specialty ingredient for you. But white balsamic, champagne vinegar, those are other white vinegars, that could work too. And then a 1/2 teaspoon of sea salt. I'm going to whisk this together. So this isn't, if you want to dress a salad, not a green salad, you could probably use less herbs. This is very herb forward. It's going to all be mixed into the grain salad. You could use less herbs or add more liquid so that it's more of a traditional, vinaigrette. Vinaigrettes are usually 3 to 1 parts oil to acid. And, this is a little bit different. We're using pretty much equal parts here of the orange juice and the oil. So now I'm adding a 1/4 cup, slowly drizzling that in last, of a neutral oil. I'm using avocado oil today, but you could use grapeseed oil. I hardly ever don't use olive oil, but I just didn't want that fruity olive oil to overpower the taste of the prunes. So just for the sake of time, I'm going to quickly bring this together because I know I want Jackie to have time to demonstrate her recipe. So then I just pour this whole thing on. So you could store this separately, make extra, and use it for other dishes. So it'd go great with proteins and all kinds of other grains. Like I said, you could use other seasonal fruits and vegetables. So you could use butternut squash. You could add roasted cauliflower to this. You could use slivered almonds instead of the pistachios. So then this all gets mixed together. I mean, look at those colors. Like I love the radicchio and the prunes. You get the purple hint, and you get these pops of sweetness and different texture from the nuts. So these are all the things we want to think about when you're creating a recipe. You get the freshness from the fennel, and then of course like the orange juice and the bright herbs. So then I'm just going to plate it, and then I'll top it with some orange zest since we have that orange juice on top. And you always want to taste, so don't serve anything until you taste it. So we want to make sure the seasoning is correct. So I'll just So I think that's great. You could always add a little pepper or use less salt, and then see if you need more salt at the end. Before we go to Jackie, I'll just top it with some orange zest here. Okay, there you go. Hope everyone enjoyed that, and I'm going to pass it over to Jackie now for her recipe.
Thanks, Christy. There were some great questions in the chat box about your recipe, but we'll come back to them. But you covered some of them already from things that you said for different substitutions. So
Okay, great.
I will get started with this recipe. So I'm going to be making a chocolate prune energy bite. This is actually Leslie's recipe. We found it on the California Prunes website and we just loved it. It's so delicious, so easy to make. My husband and my son would not stop eating them. So that's a great sign that your kiddos will like it too. So I'm going to first get some of the ingredients heated up in the microwave real quick. So we have a cup of almond butter, and to that I'm going to add 2/3 of a cup of honey. And then after I get all of that goodness out of my measuring cup, I'm going to add in a half a teaspoon of cinnamon, ground cinnamon, and then a little bit of orange zest. So Christy used some orange in her recipe, and we're using some orange in this as well. It's just such a natural pairing with prunes, and it's beautiful. So we're just using the zest here. And so I'm going to just use my microplane zester, and I'm just going to take off a little bit of that rinds. I'm not going too far. We don't want to get down to the pith. So if you start seeing white, you've gone a little too far. So I'm just going to eyeball it and estimate about a half a teaspoon, and I'm going to put that right in and just give it a quick little stir. And then I'm going to add that, I'm going to put that into my microwave. So we're going to pop it in the microwave for 1.5 minutes, and that's going to get warmed up. And it's magic when we add it to the other ingredients, because what's going to happen is that heat from all of those ingredients, first of all, it's going to make the orange essence from that rind really super fragrant. And then it's also going to help melt the chocolate chips, which are basically going to act like a glue for the energy bites. So I'm going to take 2 cups of crispy rice cereal. And then for some extra fiber, we're going to have 1.5 cups of old-fashioned rolled oats, and then a cup of slivered almonds, and then another cup of mini chocolate chips. These are dark chocolate chips. Now, if you're concerned about the sugar content, you could absolutely use a sugar-free mini chocolate chip, and that'll work just fine. And then we have a cup of diced prunes. So lots of prunes, as Christy showed you. You can get about 12 prunes in a half a cup. So this is about 24 prunes right here. So you're getting lots of these healthy benefits right into our bites. So we're just going to give this a toss so that everything is combined. There we go. My microwave is ready, and I'm going to add the ingredients in. So just handle this carefully. It's very warm. And we're going to incorporate all of these ingredients now. So it's super fast. I mean, I'm really doing this all live. So you're going to see it just comes together really fast. What takes time is actually forming them. So I do have the finished product, which I will show you, but I will show you also how to roll them. So while I'm using my elbow grease to get all of these ingredients combined, I want to ask a question. What is your favorite way to eat prunes? Already some people put in the chat box some ideas that they had, but I'd love to hear more ways that you like to enjoy prunes, whether that's as a snack or if it's in a recipe. And maybe, Christy, you could read some of those out.
Sure. I was just going back to answer some questions. So someone said, okay, chopped. Oh, sorry. There's a lot coming in. Plain dried Moroccan chicken stew. Yeah, that sounds delicious. Right out of the bag. Used to make chicken marbella. Oh, a lot of things are the answers keep moving. So many people are answering. Snack with almond butter. Let's see. Paired with protein as a snack, with yogurt, stuffed with blue cheese, diced up on toast with peanut butter. A lot of people part of their chicken recipes.
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah, lots of great prune coffee cake. That sounds good. Oh, a fig style Newton, but with prunes.
Very nice. I would say like my favorite childhood memory of eating prunes is my grandma used to make a dish called simmus, which has sweet potatoes and prunes and some orange juice in it, and honey as well. And it's delicious, and I make it now. So I just want to show you what the finished product looks like. And as you can see, everything is mixed up, and those chocolate bits are pretty much all melted, and that's really going to act like the glue for this. So this is a really fun activity for kids to get involved with. They're going to get a little messy, but it's okay. So first, what you want to do is dip your hands in some water. I just have a bowl of water here. So I'm just going to dip my hands in. Wetting your hands really helps with forming them. And this recipe makes about 64 bites. They're going to be roughly an inch in diameter. And so you're going to form them and just roll your hands together. And then every so often, you'll need to re-wet your hands and it'll be much easier to form them. So there you go. That's one little bite right there. And so what you'll do is you'll place them on a baking sheet and then put them in your fridge or your freezer and they'll firm right up. So it's really easy and it's fun to do. This is really something fun to do with your family. And you'll be making them in no time. So I'm just going to rinse my hands and I will bring over what the finished product looks like. So here is all of them with some whole prunes as well, but they're really great and they store really well in the fridge or the freezer, but they may go very quickly because they're so tasty. So I hope you enjoy this recipe. It's really a great one to share with your patients and your clients. Really great way to get a nice little energy boost and lots of good nutrition in here between the fiber and the protein and the healthy fats that are in this.
Thank you so much. Can you hold up that beautiful tray again?
Sure.
To get a picture of that. We'll take some questions now. If we miss them, just, we'll go through as quickly as we can, but just so that we can end on time. If there's something that we didn't get to, can you just pop it in the chat box again, just so that we make sure we get to everything. And we can always email you afterwards. We'll save the chat box. So if you want to email us if we didn't get to it, or we'll try to reach out to you if your name is clear. Okay, what is the name of the sweet potato recipe that Jackie mentioned?
It's called simis, and it's a Jewish recipe. It's a Ashkenazi Jewish recipe that I'm happy to share the recipe later. If you want to drop your email in the chat box, I'll find it and I'll send it. But it's very easy.
Oh, there's from the California Prunes just mentioned that there's a California version and they put that in the chat box.
Oh, perfect. I'm sure it's very similar.
Well, so the recipes were all sent out via email along with when you registered or in a separate email that we sent out earlier this week. So if you didn't get it, we will definitely send those again with the survey results. I mean, with the survey form and the recordings. They're also in the chat box. We'll put the link again before we go. And they're all found on the California Prunes website as well. Both the recipes are found there earlier. And we had a lot of questions come in earlier. So I just want to try to touch on a few of those. So I'm going to go back up. We're so thankful for all the
that last page.
Yes. Thank you.
Perfect.
So Jackie, you can go ahead with our closing remarks while I go through these questions.
Great. So before we take some questions, we just want to thank everyone for joining us today. And in case you missed the very beginning of the webinar, we'll be sending out a link to the recording of the webinar along with a survey to take to obtain your CEU certificate within 1 week. And we'll include links to the recipes again in case you missed them too. So stay tuned for more information to come on our next workshop with California Prunes, which will be taking place in May. You're now on our mailing list, so you will be kept up to date about all of our future events. So let's get into those questions. There were so many. And
yes. So Leslie, we're going to field a few to you here. And if you can't answer them, certainly we can just follow up with individuals with more information. So curious if there are studies on women in perimenopause and whether the results are the same in terms of bone health. Oh, you're muted, Leslie.
There are a lot of studies that are in progress right now. So yes, and there are even some studies that are happening in young women on oral contraceptive agents. So more to come. And, and I think as I mentioned, because peak bone mass achieved by age 30, it's never too soon to start to do that. So, prunes are not just for our grandmothers. I'm a grandmother and I eat them, but they're also for everybody else as well. Critically important to incorporate them into the diet.
Great. Now, can drinking prune juice give you the same benefit?
The prune juice, it is similar. The studies have been done with prunes simply because when you're doing prune juice, indeed, the fiber content might be a little bit lower. However, if you want to incorporate prune juice in and you're looking for the thick prune juice, that would be the one to choose. And how much? Looking at probably at least a half a cup a day.
Okay, great. There's just a simple question. Will you receive the copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Yes, everyone will receive these slides with all the references. Okay. Would the vitamin K in prunes be a trigger for AG?
I think that person meant AFib because I saw they
Oh, okay,
question.
yes.
And I
that
think they're
makes-
referring to like the blood thinning effect of vitamin K.
And so when you're looking, even though prunes do have vitamin K in them, and some of the more recent studies that have looked at this, we're looking cumulative, how much vitamin K is one having over the course of the day, and keeping vitamin K intake as stable as possible. So not doing like the roller coaster thing with vitamin K. So if somebody said, okay, I'm looking for something that provides me with some bone benefits, and as well as having the vitamin K, then you use prunes, and maybe you're using prunes instead of something like a green tea, which also has vitamin K in it.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. You just want to keep it consistent, like
Yeah.
with anything else, high in vitamin K. Okay. Do prunes affect the absorption of synthroid? I don't know if you're going to know that.
I do not know if they do.
Okay. Yeah, I don't, maybe we can get back to you on that one. If you could let us know, because it just says iPhone to everyone. If you can let us know who asked that, we can follow up with you. How many carbohydrates are in 5 to 7 prunes? Do you know off the top of your head? I can look at, we can also,
Yeah.
get back to you on, I'm guessing, I can look that up in a few moments.
And we're probably, so 5 to 7 prunes is pretty comparable to a piece of fruit is what it
Right.
is. I know
Yeah,
somebody
so about
had
like
asked a
one
question,
carb,
like for pre-diabetics is
one
you're
carb
not
counting.
eating the prune alone. You're eating the
Right.
prune in conjunction with something else to mitigate that effect somewhat.
Right, and it's got fiber in it as well, so. Okay, let me see what, okay, it's 2 o'clock now Eastern time, so we are at the end. We do have a lot of other questions, so I think we're happy to stay on for a few extra minutes to answer some remaining questions if you really want to hang on and not wait, to communicate over email. But for those of you who have to sign off now, this does complete the CE activity. So you're welcome to sign off, but we will continue and stay on, and we can keep the recording going to answer a few more questions. So if you want to check back and see what those answers were in the recording, you're welcome to do so. But otherwise, thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you at our next event. And I'll stop the screen share just so we can see each other a little bit better. Okay, so someone answered, I was thinking the same thing, about 26 grams of carbs for 5. Yeah, so 3, so that answers that question. Okay, let's go through some of the other questions that came in. Since oxalates interfere with bone health, how is it that prunes being higher in them benefit bone health?
So the reason that prunes have benefit on bone health, it's really multifactorial. Number one, it is the boron that is in them. It's pretty unique to prunes. Not a lot of foods have them. It is the vitamin K. It is the manganese. It is the potassium. It is the polyphenol. So that, prunes have a very, very unique makeup in terms of what is in them naturally. All of those things having a role to play in terms of optimizing bone health. So more things that are optimizing than anything that could potentially be negative.
Right. Okay. There were also a few questions that came in about, it's not surprising, about their tendency to contribute to diarrhea. Because it does have that laxation effect from the sorbitol, as you mentioned. So for someone, how would you recommend kind of dosing up, like easing into, introducing them into your diet more regularly?
Absolutely, and it's a great question. And, certainly in the studies, 50 grams is 5 to 7 and 100 grams is 10 to 12. And so I'm a very big believer in making hay slowly. So if prunes are not something you've eaten before, is maybe you're starting with 1 to 2, and maybe you're incorporating that into something else. So you're not just eating them alone, and then you can gradually increase that. I will tell you, I'm very personally concerned about my bone health, and I do eat 5 every day, and I just have them all at once, and it's not a problem. And interestingly, there have been some studies done at Penn State with athletes and using prunes, and it was with runners. So they were actually able to continue running, and not to the porta potty, but actually on the trail. So, it's your gut can acclimate to them very, very quickly.
And thinking about what you're pairing them with too, like, I made this farro salad. I'm used to a lot of fiber. It has nuts, it has radicchio, it's got the fiber from the farro, but maybe if you're just starting out, you could use a lower fiber grain, or, not add other really high fibrous vegetables paired with it if you're easing into, as you increase your tolerance.
Well, the other thing to think about is that the fiber in prunes is both soluble and insoluble. So insoluble is going to have a quicker gut empty. Soluble fiber is going to have a slower gut empty. So, because of that combination, really it's something that's unfound. People don't have to worry about it. It's okay.
Great. Does anyone have other questions? I'm going to go back to some of the scientific ones here, but does anyone have any other questions about the recipes?
Christy, there were a couple of questions that came in when you were doing your demo on alternatives for the mint and also for the honey.
Okay, sure. So to make this recipe vegan, it just uses a teaspoon of honey. So it's not totally necessary. It will still be great without it. You could, if you want that extra sweetness, add agave or date syrup instead of the honey, or just leave it out altogether. For mint, you could just, again, leave it out. It's great with the parsley alone. Other herbs like basil and fresh dill also go well. Dill and fennel go really well together. So it just, those are still strong flavors. So it's really based on your preference. So that's just a taste preference choice. So the mint isn't absolutely necessary if you don't like it. And I also want to suggest, if you want to make this a really complete, more of a meal and add extra protein and even more fiber, you could add something like chickpeas. So you could add, I just didn't want to have too many ingredients. You could add white beans or chickpeas to it, and it would also go really well together.
Kay asked a question about the energy bites. After they're hardened up, should they be stored in the freezer to keep their form or go in the fridge? I kept mine in the fridge and they're keeping their form beautifully. So you can keep them in your fridge or your freezer, wherever you have more room.
Great. I see a question here about substituting for the wheat in the recipe. So as I mentioned, you can use another gluten-free grain. So you can use buckwheat groats. So even though buckwheat has the word wheat in it, it's very confusing, but buckwheat is a gluten-free grain. So that's pretty on trend right now too. So you can use buckwheat groats, you could use sorghum, you could use quinoa. Those would probably be the best, I would say the best wheat-free, gluten-free grains to substitute, or like a wild rice would also be really good. So those are my suggestions for that. And there's a question here, Leslie, how do you make the Brussels sprouts recipe Leslie mentioned?
Yeah, and actually, so what I do is I roast the Brussels sprouts with a little bit of olive oil, a little bit of balsamic. I add harissa, I add walnuts, and I add the prunes. And it's just, the Brussels sprouts are bitter. So when you add the prunes, it brings the sweetness, and the harissa adds a little bit of spice, and the walnuts add the crunch, and it's delicious. And I actually would slice some onions in there as well. It's
No, I
fantastic.
love that harissa idea. Do you use the harissa paste or the harissa like dried spice?
I use both. I use the powder than I do the paste.
Great, thank you. Okay, let's go back to the science here. There's a question from Maria. Did athletes increase their fluid intake? And in the question about oxalate, are there concerns for stone formers? Please comment. So 2 questions. Did athletes increase their fluid intake? You mean with the increased intake of?
And you don't have to, because, you're not talking about, this is not, oh, I'm eating prunes and I'm having diarrhea. That's
Right.
not happening. They're like 2 separate things going on here. So no difference in the fluid intake. And, with the oxalates is kind of that, how much are people consuming overall? And when you think about 5 to 7 prunes in the course of the day, that's not a huge amount of oxalate. So, are they okay to eat? Yes, they are okay to consume regularly.
And then the question. Sorry, okay, that was just about the oxalate and the stone formers, but we addressed that. Okay, I think we're almost nearing the end here. We'll do two more minutes here. Recommendations regarding preservatives. So we discussed this a little bit offline, whether they're sulfated or not. So, I mean, you're saying, so I guess this is assuming someone's sensitive, sulfite sensitive. Sulfite is just used, it as an antioxidant, as a preservative. So they're used in a lot of dried fruits. I don't believe all prunes are sulfated. It should be on the label.
On the label.
It does have it.
Yes.
Pesticides and prunes. I'd have to get back to you on that and probably speak to the California Prune Board about that to get into specifics in terms of general pesticide use, unless someone, Leah, I don't know if you're able to chime in the chat box about that. Otherwise, we can just get back to Michelle over email. I think it probably depends on the region too, and where they're grown. There are organic varieties.
Well, and I think it's really important for people to understand that California prune growers, pretty much like farmers all over the place, are really like the stewards of the soil and about preserving natural resources, and really making a lot of headway in that regard to ensure that the product that comes to market is as healthy as it can be, and at the same time doing what needs to happen for improving crop yield, but at the same time thinking about the field of where it is that the prunes are grown.
Right, and a lot of farms now are using integrated pest management as ways of warding off pests. So that's something we can get back to you. Okay, last question. What about the prunes packaged with probiotics?
It's another way of getting the probiotics in. One of the things to be aware of is we know that not all probiotics are the same. And oftentimes in the use of probiotics, you're using probiotics for particular reasons, whether it's to support your immune system, whether it's something to help with digestive function. So it's fine to use them that way. It's fine to use them without. It's also fine to put your prunes in yogurt or some other fermented dairy food, like make a smoothie using kefir and put the prunes in there. And that's a wonderful, wonderful combination. A little bit of almond butter or peanut butter, delicious.
Thank you. That's a great way to end. So, yeah, someone said kefir and prune smoothie, yum. We agree. So thank you so much. Thank you, Leslie, for being here with us today. And we will look forward to seeing everyone hopefully at our next webinar. And you're all on our mailing list now, so you'll learn about any other future events that we have. And again, you'll all be receiving the slides and the recording. And if we didn't get to your question, please email us and we'll get back to you. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone. And I think there were some great ideas that came through in the chat box, so we'll save that and try to send that out as well.
Thank you.